Hey everybody, 10.0.7 is coming out tomorrow, and with it comes some big changes to pretty much all the healing specs. So in this video I wanted to take a look at each spec and talk about how I think the meta will shake out for Mythic Plus healers in the upcoming patch. In this video I'm going to give you my big picture summarized ideas of the changes coming to each spec and what they mean, rather than deep dive into every single talent rearrangement. So let's get right into it. So this is roughly how I'd establish the current M plus healer meta in 10.0.5. We're going to use this as a baseline as we go and rearrange things based on the changes we see. Remember that when you make a tier list, you're placing specs relative to each other, so just because your favorite spec got a new buff doesn't necessarily mean it will leapfrog a class higher than it on the tier list that also got a buff. We can't tunnel when we make tier lists. Please keep in mind that these are just my predictions based on the patch notes and not a definitive list by any means, and that these are definite TLDR versions of the changes happening for each spec. So let's start at the top with Preservation Evoker. 10.0.5's top dog when it comes to Mythic Plus healing. Preservation Evoker is getting a couple of stiff nerfs, but if we look at it from an M plus vacuum, I still think Evoker is going to be in a really good spot. So what's really happening here? 20% nerf to Temporal Anomaly Shield, one less echo per cast in Mythic Plus anyway, meaning you need one more global cooldown to blanket your group in echoes, and Lifebind and Golden Hour no longer gain 100% echo benefit from TA applied echoes. This is going to equate to decent healing throughput nerf in Mythic Plus. I'm interested to see how viable a Lifebind Emerald Communion ramp cooldown is going to be now, but Evoker still has a massive kit for healing big AoE damage even without these things, and I'd honestly don't see us even dropping the TA talent in Mythic Plus. Raid is a different video entirely though, but all I'm going to do is slide Evoker from S plus to A plus for the moment, because even if it's still going to be good, it's undeniably taking a step back while other specs are taking a step forward. Okay, so let's get into Resto Druid. Lots of talents moving around here, but my overall interpretation of Druid is that it's going to be essentially the same, just probably do a little bit more damage. Protector of the Pack's cap is going up again, and I think this new talent, Deep Focus, is something you're actually going to want to drop a point into to increase your single target damage. No nerfs coming, only minor buffs to an already S tier spec makes me say that Druid remains S tier until something passes it by. Druid has a fantastic kit and healing profile for Mythic Plus and great survivability. It's been the total package all expansion long so far, and I expect that to continue. On to the Resto Shaman. This spec has been on the rise for a while now, and while there are a load of things changing for Shaman, let's just focus on the big ones. Buffs to Ancestral Shift and some of its synergizing talents are going to help make Shaman a little more tanky, which is always a good thing. Many active cast damage spells like Lightning Bolt are getting buffs, while the more passive Acid Rain, which is doing insane damage on live, is getting a 20% nerf, which is probably a bit of a net nerf to overall damage, but Shaman should remain very high on the DPS spec, and Acid Rain will likely still be worth taking. With the rework to Earth and Harmony, Earth Shield now reduces damage by the wearer by up to 6%, and with the Elemental Orbit talent, you'll be able to have one on yourself as well as an ally, which seems like a really awesome new tool for Shaman. On top of this, we've got Chain Heal bouncing an additional time for a longer range, and the PvP talent Tidebringer is being added to the talent tree to even further buff Chain Heal. Also, 8% increased healing across the board. The tides are rising, friends. Shaman is moving up to the front of the A tier. Okay, so next up we've got Disc Priest. I'm a little disappointed to see basically no changes for Disc. The 10.0.5 changes were awesome and really put Disc back on the map, but there's no reason to think it's not going to get passed up by other specs since it's remaining more or less untouched. So honestly, by way of just nothing changing while other specs are getting buffs, I'm just going to put it down into the B tier, assuming that some buff specs are probably going to catch it or pass it up. Well, there's about 15 pages of Paladin changes, but mostly centered around Ret. But what does that mean for the Holy Paladin? You've got talents moving around a little bit, which should result in some improvement to healing and survivability, but nothing really for damage. You'll be getting a new talent to increase Crusader Strike's range, which is a great quality of life change, especially on Explosive Week, as well as having it heal you for 2% of damage done. Sanctified Plates, a talent which increases your armor by 10%, stamina by 5%, and damage taken from AoE 5% per rank for 2 ranks, seems awfully nice and something you'll definitely want to take. And probably most importantly, Divine Toll being on a 15-second shorter cooldown is also really nice, as it will line up better with a lot of the damage phases we see in Dragonflight.
So how impactful is all this stuff on the whole? Well, when I compare it to like what's happening with Monk or Shaman, I don't think it really measured up, and although Paladin started off as kind of the third place healer back in 10.2, it seems to have steadily fallen off, and I don't think this is quite enough to pick it back up, so I'm going to place it in the B tier. Speaking of Monk, let's talk Mistweaver. I know I always joke about Mistweaver Hopium, but I think this time Blizzard has finally gotten it right. Let's get into the most impactful changes here. First of all, Ancient Teachings, the talent that makes fist weaving heal, is getting changed a bit so that it now does AoE healing instead of picking a somewhat random target to single target heal. I've heard some arguments about this, but I think for the most part, for the everyday Monk players, this is a great change, even if it does simplify the playstyle Mistweaver a bit. A series of buffs to Shalens is going to give Monks something they have desperately needed all expansion long, a reliable oh shit button to press when big damage goes out on your party. Finally, you got Thunder Focus T making Enveloping Mist instant in addition to its current effect to go along with buffs to Enveloping Mist, which should help Monk in yet another area of need, emergency single target healing, and allow you to keep DPSing while using Enveloping Mist. So I think not only will Mistweaver feel better to play, it's also going to just simply be a lot better healer in general. So let's show Monk some love, guys. I'm going to move it to the back of the A tier for the first time in a long time.
I'm a little disappointed in the lack of impactful changes coming to Holy Priest in this patch. Holy has already been lagging behind in M+. All these buffs to Lightwell are not going to really make any difference in M+, as I still can't imagine it being better to take than Lightweaver, and likewise the buffs to Divine Image becoming a little bit more reliable still doesn't sound like an improvement over Divine Word, so unfortunately what I see here is a bottom tier M+ spec getting essentially nothing to help them out, and because of that, I'm dropping them into the C tier by themselves. So here's my current prediction tier list for 10.0.7. I may be being a little hard on Evoker, I guess time will tell, but I feel like the highlights of this patch are going to be the buffs to Shaman and Monk, and the lowlights are going to be the lack of really anything for Disc and Holy Priest. I'm a little surprised and kind of confused about where Blizzard is going with Resto Druid, and while I enjoy playing the spec and I'm glad to see it not getting nerfed, I think the gripes about Druid being a little OP are kind of warranted. Another thing to keep in mind is that these balance changes are going to be taking us into 10.1, where we add tier sets to the mix, which will have a further effect on how these specs play. If you want to see my thoughts on tier sets, I just came out with a video about it last week. I'll link it down in the description below. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, whether it be your own specific spec and what's happening to that, or just the meta in general. Do you agree with my changes? Do you think that something should be different? I'd love to hear from you guys as always. And if you made it this far without falling asleep, I'd always appreciate it if you hit that like button, subscribe to see more of my content in the future. Also, you can always check out my live stream right here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, where we have lots of fun healing in Mythic Plus, playing all kinds of different healers. Hope to see you there. Until next time, happy healing.